Are we feeling alive? I'm alive. I was on the wrong screen. Ah! Hey, everybody. How do I sound, kids? Somebody tell me how I sound. Where's Elbow when I need him? Dum-ba-dum-bum. Thank you, David and Alan. Hey, everybody. This is Mike Meyers on the Wednesday edition of the live stream for Ask Mike Anything. The goal of this live stream is to provide those of us who are isolated by the coronavirus an opportunity to continue our studies on the CompTIA IT Fundamentals, A+, Net+, and Security Plus, as well as other certifications, but that's really where our bread is buttered, as it were. So welcome aboard, everybody. A couple of things I'd like to say for starters here. Because the goal of this live stream is to ask Mike anything, you ask me questions, and then I answer them. So you have two different ways to ask questions here. Number one, you can put them here into the live chat itself. Either I will answer them, or we've also got Dave Rush and Scott Jernigan et al. Who are here who will also help, along with a bunch of regular folks who are also very helpful. However, if your question is long or a little bit complicated, you're welcome to send me an email for that question. So all you have to do is send me an email to michaelm@total7.com. And if you think your question's dumb or embarrassing, which it isn't, you can always send me an email and feel free to do that. Also, I am Senor Pepe if you're a gamer at all on Steam. And if you want to know anything about me, just type in Desweds, because that is my nom de guerre. I've got some very bad news today, guys. I'm afraid that I just cracked one of my teeth just a few moments ago. And I'm okay. It hurts. It's sharp. I'm not dying, but I've managed to get an emergency dentist appointment, so I'm going to have to cut today's short. Sorry about that, kids. I didn't even have time to warn the gang so that we could come up with a plan B, but I don't think anybody will mind too terribly much, as long as I don't drink anything cold. So I've got a nice cup of lukewarm coffee here. So we're going to only run for 1 hour today, and I apologize for that. But I am here. My pain is for you. I'm kidding. I'm going to go get it fixed. So we only have an hour today, unfortunately. What else do we have going on here today? I got a bunch of emails from you guys Monday night and Tuesday, and I think even a couple today, where people were having different little problems here and there getting their virtual machines set up. And that is normal and good and okay. Don't panic about this, especially when you're trying to do something like this. It's a little bit hairy. But the nice part is, if we get this set up, and we will, you're going to have something that's not only going to help you for A+, it'll help you for Network+, it'll help you for Security+, it'll help you for all kinds of other stuff in the future as well. So what started off as a simple PowerShell course, which was supposed to take maybe 2, maybe 3 days, has blossomed, and this is perfectly fine and good. It's going to help you pass the certification exams, and I don't mind this at all. We are going to be going into a little bit more detail on setting up these virtual machines. Another very interesting question that came up over the week is some folks were like, hey, Mike, can I do this with Linux? Yeah, you can, as a client system. I don't want to develop that. However, what I do want to do is show you and talk about something that will probably end up being standard part of my training material. Remember, guys, you're guinea pigs. So a lot of times I start coming up with cool ideas that will end up being put into my more formal training. And you could say, you were here when Mike thought of this. So what we're going to be talking about is what I'm going to call the perfect virtual machine study network. And getting this thing set up properly early on in the process, like during your A+ part of your life, will really be something that you'll turn to time and time again. I mean, even once you get past the CompTIA stuff, honestly, you'd start even looking at other types of certifications, Cisco or anything like that, where you need some kind of box to talk to a router or whatever it might be, having a nice stable VM network can really be a big plus. So we're going to be developing that. Sadly, I cannot help every person debug little problems that you might have, okay? You're going to have to figure that one out. Keep in mind that we've got a Discord channel that is now up and cooking. My buddy Jose is running that. It is not an official Mike Meyers channel, but that could be one resource for you. A second resource for you is you're getting to know people here online via YouTube, and you can connect to those on an individual basis. Tolowit's a big pain in the rear end. Bother him. I'm teasing you, buddy. Teasing. And I can help to some extent, so don't be afraid to ask me questions on some of the little things that might be popping up in terms of getting this set up. Anyway, what I thought I would do today, since unfortunately things are a little bit shorter than I wanted it to be today, and I do apologize for that, guys, but it's sharp. It's like really sharp. Now, as long as I don't blow air over it, I'm okay. What I do want to do is I had already prepped up a little PowerPoint to kind of tighten up the steps necessary to use VirtualBox as a hypervisor to set up what I'm now going to be calling the perfect virtual machine study network. And so it'll be a little bit of a review, and I also think it's going to help a lot of you folks who've been having problems, who've been emailing me. And so I want to run through that. Once we've got that up and running today, I would like to try to start getting our client machine connected to the domain. And once he's up and running, I would then like to go over to the domain controller and start setting up domain accounts, which is pretty cool stuff. And once we got that up and cooking, I think that's probably going to be all I can pull off in the hour. So again, I apologize. We will pick this right back up next Monday. And I promise we got more PowerShell coming. So these things happen, kids. What can I say? All right, so let's go ahead and dive into this. First of all, keep in mind that just because you are kind enough to show up on the Mike Meyers AMA channel, we are offering special deals. We always offer these deals. They change sometimes. But for this week, it's 50% off all A+, Net+, Total Tester. It's our practice questions, and also the SIM bundles, which are the performance-based questions, and also the Security Plus practice questions. And we're offering all of that at 50% off, which is a ridiculously low price. All you have to do is go to www.totalsem.com, go over to our merchant area, buy yourself some practice questions, and at checkout, just type in the code 101920, and Scott Jernigan will put that up. Yep, thank you, Scott. I see it already. And you get to get already what I think are the best darn practice questions out there for CompTIA certifications. Already probably about the cheapest, at least of the good ones out there, for 50% off. So we'll dive into that. I do have one interesting story. So you guys remember my beautiful, groovy Galaxy Fold? Well, the Galaxy Fold broke. So I was like running over, trying to, see if it was under warranty. It wasn't, because I dropped it. And the guy's like, see, you dropped it. There's a huge crack here. And then I was going to go through my cellular provider. I have some insurance through there. But while I was over at the Samsung store, first of all, they're like, hey, are you Mike Meyers? So, of course, that makes my head go like this, because at Samsung, a lot of the people have A+ and Net+ certification, and a lot of them use my book, so that always makes me feel great. By the way, Samsung retail is hiring. Really looked like an interesting job, too. I don't know, whatever town you're in, try to find your local Samsung stores, and they're just straight up hiring. And one of the people there told me they start at $18 an hour. It's not bad. But it is a retail job, but it's always interesting. See, how did I know this? Because I asked them. I was like, hey, are you hiring? And there you go. So anyway, I ended up getting the Galaxy Fold 2. And it is, oh, you can see I don't even have all my icons lined out yet. But it's like take the Galaxy Fold but make it even mo better. It is cool, and I have the coolest phone in town, and I don't care, Philly DD. I'm Mike Meyers, popular author. So I went and got me this, and it is sweet. What is pretty cool, though, is I also lit up my old Pixel 3 XL, and I forgot how good Pixels are. I got to tell you, man, you know, if you're not stupid with your money like I am, spending ridiculous amounts of money on outrageous phones, man, the Pixel phones, if you're an Android person, you should really consider them. Pixel phones, they don't have all the extra garbage added to Android that folks like Samsung do. It's the pure and clean Android, and a lot of fun. And unlike my Fold, which is cutting edge technology, which I'm paying through the nose for, ouch, that old Pixel 3 XL is just cranking along, and it's running fine. The latest version of Android 11? Yeah. And it's just happy as a clam. I don't know if we know that mollusks are really joyous, but by golly, it's happy as a clam. So got yet another toy, except this time I'm going to get some like bumper made out of anti-gravity or something. I don't know. I'm going to have to come up with something. I just abuse phones too much. So we'll get on that. All right. So let's see. Are there any critical questions? Scott, did you see any critical questions from the gang? Patricia Grace is on early for a change. You literally said that, Patricia. That's hilarious. DL Ross, hello. It's the first time I've been logged in Mike's lecture. Hello. Hail, DL Ross. Welcome. Welcome to you, sir. Sam McFarland's here. Hi, Mike. Hi, Sam. Tolowit, of course. That man, Tolowit, your furniture, dude. Furniture is a good thing. Ben Nana's there. Hey, Ben. Tarun's here. Andre, my buddy, is here. Connor is here. Ben Nana's got 2 questions for you today. Here we go. 1:56 p.m. Ben Nana, is the number of front bus wires related to the pins in the RAM? Yes. It really depends on the CPU, but you got to remember your CPU has a memory controller chip built into it. And remember, the whole function of a CPU is to grab a byte or more of RAM at a time and do something with it. That RAM is a program. It might be Microsoft Word, it might be your web browser, I don't know. But in order to do what a CPU does, it has to grab RAM. Now, the minimum it'll grab at any chunk is a byte, but usually RAM is a lot wider than that. RAM is always a lot wider than that. Like a standard DIMM chip, a DDR4 chip is a 64-bit wide chip. So when you grab, if you were even to grab 1 byte of RAM, it would go ahead and just grab a bunch more in anticipation you're going to want the rest of that. But the front end buses are, God, I don't even want to say, every time I say something like this, there's like another version of Intel microarchitecture I'm not aware of that popped out. But assuming I'm right, and the way that memory is still channeled, it's the front side bus. Even that's becoming, I'm going to really have to think about how I teach about memory. It's not wrong. It's right, but there's a little more complexity to it that I think ought to be added. But I'll make it real easy. It's about 128 bits wide. So usually you're taking 2 DDR4 sticks that are 64 bits wide, so you're grabbing a lot of stuff with every click of the clock. And there are wires coming out of the CPU that are designed to talk directly to the RAM, the DIMMs of the RAM, to address that memory. So, but you got to keep in mind, we got 2 sets of wires. We got 1 set of wires, which are the addressing wires, which basically say, here's the one I want, and then there's another set of wires that says, bring it in, okay? So that 128-bit of the front side bus is where the data comes in from the RAM, but there's another set of wires that actually do the addressing that says where, if you think of RAM as a big spreadsheet that is 128 bits wide and 2 gigabytes high or whatever it might be. So one set of wires puts the pointer where it needs to go, and the other set of wires actually takes all those ones and zeros and brings it into the CPU, and the CPU is like, and it starts running Word or Firefox or Half-Life or whatever you're doing. So, yes. Looking for quick questions. Alan Duggan. Tarun Chandra, in Trusted Platform Modules, TPMs, this is 1:57 p.m., the manufacturer burns in an encryption key. Sure. Does the manufacturer destroy it afterwards from his database? No, because the encryption key isn't really burned in per se, because it uses it uses other stuff to run it. Other stuff on the motherboard, like the serial number of the CPU and a few other things. So even if some bad guy got that encryption key, it still wouldn't work because the actual encryption key you use is built from the core key that's in the TPM plus the serial number of the CPU. There's other stuff. But the bottom line is I'm assuming you'd be like, ooh, somebody's got the key. They don't, because the key is more than just the key in the TPM. It's built on other parts of the components on the motherboard. Banana. And I am struggling with understanding multi-core and hyper-threading. Since most, this is 1:57 p.m. Since most CPUs have both, I guess, CPU with 4 cores and 8 threads, I have difficulty understanding what is working together and what makes up the threads. Okay. If you have a CPU that has 4 cores and it has 8 threads, it has hyperthreading. That's what hyperthreading means. It turns one core into the essence of being able to handle 2 threads at once. What they really should say, if a hyperthreading machine with 4 cores, they shouldn't say it has 8 threads. They should say that a hyperthreading capable CPU with 4 cores can act, bark, smell, and taste like it's got 8 cores. That would be a better way to say it. Remember when we're talking about a program. A program is something that sits on your hard drive or your SSD when you're not using it. So Microsoft Word, let's just go with that. I got a better one. Let's go with your web browser. Okay, so when your computer's turned off, the web browser programming is sitting on your mass storage, right? Now, you fire up your computer and you start your web browser. The moment you start that web browser, what you're doing is you're copying some amount. Most programs rarely copy their entire contents over to RAM, but they'll copy a big chunk of what they need into RAM. So when you double click on Firefox, what you're really doing is you're moving a big chunk of the Firefox program. Because remember, most programs aren't one single executable file. You got dynamic link libraries and all kinds of other stuff in there. So when you double click on your Firefox icon, you're lighting up a program. I'm pretty sure it's called Firefox.exe, but there's other programs. If you look in the folder where Firefox is installed, there's a lot of other files. They're not all installed at once. Okay, bottom line is there's enough in there. If it needs any of those other files in there, it'll pull them up on an as-needed basis. Okay, so now it's sitting in RAM. Okay? So what we have now in RAM are processes. And you can actually see processes if you run, oh, why am I going blank at a critical time like this, Scott Jernigan? Program to show processes in Windows. This is embarrassing. I know this stuff. That is not the one I was thinking of, but it's saying task list. Oh, sure enough. Here we go. Does this whole please work? There we go. All right, let me clear the screen so you guys can see all this. Let me clear the screen harder. Hang on, guys. All right, so I can type in task list. Let me do a quick help on that because I forget what all the things are. Scott wants me to use Task Manager. I don't want to use Task Manager. So I'm just going to run task list, T-A-S-K-L-I-S-T. And here's all of the different processes that are running. You have to be very careful about, when you say the word process, all you're talking about is that you have some amount of programming that is sitting in RAM. They may or may not, at any given click of the clock, be running through the CPU. So you have a process, which is a chunk of code in your RAM, and then what it does is it then pulls threads, which are then pulled into the CPU's pipelines, the CPU's cores. Sorry, I'm old here. And so the processes spawn threads, and the threads are actually pulled individually through the CPU. A thread is a very distinct chunk of code that is, it all has to run, it needs to run together in order to get something done. So you usually want to run each thread through a single core. The challenge to doing this is that each core has pipelining, which allows it to run sometimes more than one thread at a time. It's kind of like, imagine if you're at the laundromat and you've got 2 washing machines and 2 dryers, and you're running one thread, and that thread only needs 1 washing machine and 1 dryer. There are situations, and the CPU does this on its own magically. We have no interfacing on this. Well, programmers have some effect on it when they write their code. Is that it'll sit there and go, hey man, I'm not all the way busy. Yes, I am processing this one thread, but I have enough space. It has to have the smarts to do this. Do you understand? These smarts are called hyperthreading. Okay? It is a feature that is built into most CPUs today. Not all. Most CPUs have hyperthreading. So, and it does this automatically for you. Hyperthreading increases performance with the same number of cores. That's it. It's not any more complicated than that. It's pretty cool. So there's actually a Ben Nana. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to look up, do a Google search for a program called Process Explorer. Process Explorer is a wonderful little program. Let me see if I can pull it up for you. It comes from a guy named Mark Russinovich, and it is a beautiful graphical tool that works a lot like Task Manager in Windows, but it does a little bit more. And one of the things you can do with Process Explorer that you can't do with Task Manager is you'll see all the processes running, but you can right-click on any process and get the details. And one of the things it will show you is whatever thread was actually going through the system on that particular process at that particular click of the clock. And obviously the threads go through it billions of times a second, but it is kind of cool. Process Explorer, Mark Russinovich. Just do a Google search. I just typed in Process Explorer and it came right up. It is a wonderful tool. Andre, still playing with the server. Lots of guys are. In fact, we're gonna take a moment, and I want to double check we have all the steps here. Jose Braden. There's Dave Rush. Rob Frederick. Chris Arkwright, 201. Hi, Mike. Thanks for. I have earned the A plus Net Plus, and 2 weeks ago. Wow, dude, Chris Arkwright, way to go, buddy. All three of them. Go get a job. Chris, the next thing for you to do is get a job. Chris, I'm just going to assume you're working. Okay. Chris, are any plans for an updated series for the new CYSA? Yes, Chris. The problem is this COVID. The last place most of the experts we have want to do is jump in an airplane and go hang out with a bunch of Texans in a sound stage with cameras and all that for a couple of weeks and get sick. So we're actually having a lot of difficulty bringing in experts who are understandably concerned about staying healthy. So we've definitely had some delays, but we are moving forward. We've come up with kind of an interesting plan. We're reducing production value a little bit and doing kind of a remote thing, and it's okay. It's smart. People want their toys out there, so we understand. Choco Taco. Thomas Robinson. Pinky Orange. Good day. Is the CompTIA Server Plus exam worth taking? Pinky, I measure what, I'm sorry, Scott Jernigan's mad if I don't say the timestamp, 2:02 p.m. Pinky, the problem I always have, if I don't see real jobs that are actually asking for these things, I tend to shy away from them. I do see some jobs out there that specify Server Plus, but there's a reason I don't do a Server Plus book, because I wouldn't sell enough to make enough to pay for it. So I'll let you decide how that fits for you. It's an interesting certification, though. It does a pretty good job. But I got to be honest with you, if I were going to be looking at a certification of that ilk, I'd be taking a look at Cloud Plus, which is almost the same thing, but more in the cloud, a little more virtualization. Kevin Lopez, Web Dev Bootcamp. Smile, Mike. You are not on 24. You are on a 24-inch monitor at the same time. Ignore the last email I sent you. I did a huge. Okay, all right, man. Cool. Web Dev Bootcamp. All right, man. I got to tell you guys, I got swamped. When I'm telling you, I got so many emails. Ouch. I just got mauled. And it was good. They were all good questions. I think I'm going to be able to answer most of you guys right here. 2:03 p.m. Krampus Dumpling. Hey, Mike. Hope you're doing well. I am also drinking warm coffee. Yeah, Krampus. Mine's not real warm. It's kind of lukewarm. Connor Wellman. Good luck. Yeah, look. People crack teeth every now and then. It happens. It's actually a crown that cracked. So it's not a big deal. It's not really cracked. I mean, if it was really cracked, you'd be listening to Scott Jernigan right now, because I'd be in great pain. 204 DL Ross, I bought Mike's guide. Is there a way to get the answers to the questions at the end of each chapter? DL Ross, I'm going to let Scott Jernigan answer that, because really what happens is that the big red softcover books are really textbooks. They're really, in my opinion, they shouldn't be sold in the trade markets. You should get them if you're a student and you have a teacher. And those books come with teacher's guides and teacher answer banks and lab tools and all this other stuff, which is designed for people who are in classrooms. So understand where I'm coming from? If we just pass those questions out, that would be a bad thing. But there is some mechanism. I'm going to let Scott Jernigan, just keep your eye on the live chat, and he should have an answer for you, Krampus. I believe the answer is we can do something for you. Jose Braden, how are you? I'm great. I got a cracked tooth. Taryn Charles, very tough to install VirtualBox in CentOS. Is it? I thought there was a VirtualBox version that ran on. I'm just doing a quick search. it's so interesting. I mean, this is a good point that you bring up, and that is why don't I just assume that I'm using Windows 10 as my host system, and I install VirtualBox on Windows. I don't recall ever installing VirtualBox on a Linux system. It supports it. That's what they say. I did some quick searching, and there were a couple of things I saw. How to perfectly install VirtualBox on CentOS. But Tarun, I don't have any expertise there, my friends, and I apologize. Thomas Robinson, I bought some dental glass cement repair for my teeth. I've got dental insurance. I'm going to take advantage of it. Kevin Lopez at 206 is talking about resizing the window. We're going to talk about that today. I'm going to quit fiddle fart and I'm going to have to dive in here. Turner, where's Jack is, I don't know. He don't want to be with me today. He was around. Yeah, Brendan S. at 210, cracking stuff. That's me. Andre DeGoy, let me guess, you got the phone fixed replaced for free. No, what they did is they gave me an outrageous trade-in for the new phone. It was extremely attractive option. Scott Jernigan and his iPhone 12. All right, guys, is that the answer? Legally, we cannot give out the answers to the textbook questions. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, man. Yeah. Dave Rogers passed. 1002, you're A+ certified. Excellent. Do you know when Network Plus cert renews? I do, but I can't tell you. It's going to be coming up, but it's, we're talking like a year. So, and remember my rule is, if you can take the old exam, always take the old exam. Nobody is ever going to be in an interview going, so what version of Network Plus they don't care. Nobody cares. When a new test comes out, nobody knows anything about it. I have the same objectives you guys have, okay? I got a couple of people at CompTIA who can sometimes give me a little carefully worded insight, but in general, over the 3-year course, we learned stuff. I can't change the words in a book, but I can certainly make changes to videos. We had questions to test banks. You always want to take the older test if you can. And that's not just for CompTIA. That's not just for Mike Meyers stuff. I mean, that'll be Microsoft or Cisco or whatever. Always take the older exam. Remember, it's not like they close one exam and start another. There's always overlap. See what I'm saying? So when a new test comes out, you can still take the old test. 3 months, 6 months, depends on what the certifying body feels like. Always take the old exam whenever possible. Connor Wellman. Yes, of course, it's an off-brand. It's an Inland mechanical keyboard. I forgot the brand. But it's a nice little keyboard. Inland OMK X201. So far, so good. I got it because I needed the backlight because the studio's a little, believe it or not, it's a little dark in here to me. No, Scott, I don't have COVID. I keep coughing. Net Plus probably fall 2021 allegedly. Okay, yeah. Chris Ackright, you already have a job. Good man. Well done, sir. Okay, let's go ahead and dive in today. Man, I should have told everybody we only got an hour. Everybody's signed off. We've got a smaller crowd. That's fine. What I want to do right now, real quick, is I want to address all of these questions. What we're going to do, and I want this as kind of a documentation thing so people can review to it later, and that is, how do you set up the perfect VM study network using VirtualBox, I guess I should say this, on a Windows system. So let's go ahead and just kind of march through the steps, and let's look at this as really more of a checkbox to help you make sure you're getting done what you need to do, okay? So let's take a look at this little PowerPoint I've whipped up. So the perfect virtual machine study network, all right? So number one, the steps are going to be prep your host system. You're going to install VirtualBox. You're going to create a separate network within the VirtualBox Manager. You're going to download the ISOs. That's going to be Windows Server. That's going to be Windows 10. And I'm going to go ahead and toss in some kind of Linux. We're not going to need the Linux for PowerShell, but it's nice to have it in there. We can use it later. You build your virtual machines within VirtualBox, and that's where we go. So, all right, so let's just go ahead and dive in. Number one, you're going to prep your system. First, the big question is RAM. How much RAM do you need? I would not even consider having a host system with 8 gigabytes would be a rock bottom, barely making it minimum. 16 gigabytes of RAM would make me much happier. You would be successful with 16 gigabytes of RAM, assuming, again, Windows 10 is the host system. And if you can get 32 gigs of RAM, that is absolutely superb. My systems run a lot more than 16 gigabytes. I'll do 32 or 64 gigs of RAM, depending on the system and what the motherboard can handle. Yes, see, that's the place where you end up spending money on this stuff. You get a copy of Windows for free, you get VirtualBox for free, you get Linux for free. You usually end up having to snap more RAM into your system. Okay, next, storage. You don't need that much storage. Most systems today are going to be walking around with a terabyte of a terabyte of storage in them, whether that's an SSD or if you're still using rotational media. It doesn't matter. So storage is not a really big issue for me. It'll come up again, but once we start setting up the virtual machines, and we'll talk about that. In general, if you're going to use VirtualBox, it will ask you what you're trying to install. Well, I'm trying to install Windows Server. I'm trying to install Windows 10. I'm trying to install Linux. And when you tell VirtualBox what operating system you intend to install in this virtual machine that you're making, it will set most of this stuff for you. Dang near every setting can be changed later except storage. So, like later you'll see we can put in, it'll say 2 gigs of RAM and you can adjust that for the individual virtual machine that you're setting up. But you got to be a little bit careful. So if you've got a terabyte, if you've got half a terabyte of storage, and it doesn't have to be your boot, your boot drive. Like I've got an M.2 in this machine. I think it's like a half terabyte. It's a little on the small side, but I still use rotational media. I like it. And I can go ahead and put all my virtual machines over on that second drive, no problem. So if you've got half a terabyte or more of space, you're going to be fine. You could probably get away with a lot less. You're going to be using, on average, 30 to 50 gigabytes per virtual machine. That can be a lot smaller than that. Like on a Linux box, it's probably less than 10 gigabytes. And when I say these numbers, those aren't real gigabytes. So if you set up a virtual machine and you're going to say, I need 30 gigabytes of storage, the actual virtual machine file itself is probably going to be a lot smaller than that. It can grow up to 30 gig or 50 gig or whatever you choose, but it won't be that big initially. However, this is the one place that people do get in trouble, because it's not that the operating system, it's not like Windows Server is going to need that much, or Windows 10 is going to need that much, or certainly Linux doesn't need that much. It's as if you start installing stuff in that virtual machine. You're like, oh, I need to put a copy of, I don't know, put something scary in there, something really big. Then that virtual machine could run into trouble, and that will bite you in the rear end down the road. But keep in mind, most of the time, especially if you're studying for CompTIA certifications, you're not going to be adding a lot of goobity gawk to these virtual machines. You may throw in a little diagnostic tool or something like that, so they're not going to take up that much space. Virtualization support. Keep in mind that you have to have a CPU that has VTX/VTD virtualization support. darn near all of them do. This is where people get in trouble, where they're trying to use an old system to learn on. But virtualization support's been around for, way over 5 years now. So even an older system almost certainly has virtualization support built into it. I cannot tell you off the top of my head whether your particular CPU supports virtualization. Look it up. Or you could also use CPU ID, the wonderful free utility, CPU ID, CPU Z, and it's a free piece of software. You download it, you run the software, and it will tell you everything you want to know about your CPU, including does it support virtualization. If you have a CPU that doesn't support virtualization, you're still okay. We're just going to have to be careful about how we deal with what version of VirtualBox you install. All right. So here we go. We're going to install VirtualBox. So here's your link to install VirtualBox. Guys, keep in mind these links change, okay? But the VirtualBox does a pretty good job of keeping the same URL for their downloads. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to install version 6.1 as preferred, but 6.1 requires you have a CPU that supports virtualization. If it doesn't support virtualization, they still have version 6.0. Hang on a minute. It's not 6.1, it's 6.1 XXXXX, okay? Or it's sorry, I was checking for questions. Or if it's 6.0 whatever, right? So don't look for a version 6.1 and nothing else. They have a bunch of goo after them. The other thing, and this is on this same page, folks, is you want to download the VirtualBox extension pack. The extension pack just adds some kind of really convenient features. And you're actually, whenever you go to VirtualBox, you're downloading two things. You're downloading VirtualBox itself plus the extension pack. You will install VirtualBox, and then it will ask you if you want to install the extension pack, and you just point it to your downloads folder, and it will take it from there. Okay, the other thing you have to do is create a separate NAT. By default, VirtualBox will create one NAT, and it's usually like 192.168.56 dot whatever. And it has a built-in DHCP server and all these nice things, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a perfectly wonderful NAT to use, and most of the time when I'm setting up virtual machines, I just use the built-in ready-to-go NAT, and all my devices inside of there are going to be 192.168.56 dot something, okay? However, what we're going to be doing, or hopefully a lot of us have already done, is we're going to be setting up a network with a domain controller in it that's going to have its own DHCP server, its own DNS server. So if you've installed 7 or 8 virtual machines, and then all of a sudden you throw a Windows domain controller in there, it can do weird things. So for me, if I'm going to be setting up stuff that might be spewing out DHCP or looking for DNS or weird IPv6 things, I'm just going to set up these separate NAT networks. If you don't care, if the only thing you're ever going to do with your virtual machine is install these 3 VMs I'm talking about and never do anything again, you can completely skip this step and make everybody 192.168.56 dot something, and you'll be fine. Just be careful if you ever decide to install one more thing just to see what will happen. That's where you get in trouble. All right, so to create a separate NAT, what you got to do is you have to go into the Oracle VM VirtualBox Manager, okay? And if you look carefully on this screen, you can see here's all my virtual machines that I've installed thus far. But you can do all this before you install even one virtual machine. And what you do is you go to File up here in the corner and you select Preferences, and you get this screen. So you go down to Network, and then you add a NAT network. It's pretty straightforward. It's going to say, okay, what do you want this NAT network to be? And in my example, I said I want mine to be 10.0.2 WAC24. And you'll go, okay, and it'll say, all right. It'll say, do you want a DHCP server? Turn that off. or you can leave it on for a little bit. We'll turn it off later. Does it have IPv6 support? I'm going to go ahead and I'd say just turn that on for now, although we're not going to be using that anytime soon. And then it has like port forwarding and all kinds of other little stuff, which, wouldn't be necessary. The thing you got to remember, though, they don't tell you this, but if you set up a NAT network and it's 10.0.2, WAC24, your default gateway will be 10.0.2.1. If you set up 192.168.33 WAC24, your router will be 192.168.33.1. They don't say that to you. You're just supposed to know that through osmosis or something. Okay, so we set up the NAT network. And you can see on mine, actually have two. They just do different things. Okay, next, let's start downloading some ISOs. So here's the link for the Windows Server ISO. These are 180-day trials. You can get Windows 10 right here. However, honest to Pete, you can use any Windows installed media. The only thing is you're not going to be able to activate it. So do what you're going to do quick. So people are like, oh, Mike, what happens when it runs out? Well, you do it again. It's good practice for you anyway. Windows 10 is $99, although if you go on eBay, you can get some deals where you buy like a, it's like a 100 gigabyte hard drive and a copy of Windows 10 for like $5 or something like that. That is of a questionable legality, and you do whatever you want to do there. I buy legal copies. Okay, now here's the other thing I'm going to throw in. This has nothing to do with learning about PowerShell or Windows domain controllers. However, you should consider grabbing a Linux ISO 2. The two that I'm going to recommend, number one, I'm an Ubuntu guy and I'm comfortable with it. I like the Ubuntu desktop. I know how to make it work and I'm happy with it. I have lately played with Linux Mint because a lot of you guys are saying it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and it is surprisingly convenient. And so I'll put the Mike Meyers seal of approval on that too. Now, one more time, this has nothing to do with learning about PowerShell. This has nothing to learn about Active Directory. It does have something to do with, number one, if you're going to be learning about A+ or Net+, you've got to have a copy of Linux. You're going to have to play with it and understand it and learn it, okay? Both of those certifications have a lot of Linux stuff in them. So go ahead and get a copy of that. The other nice thing, though, that's actually kind of fun, is that it gives you a chance to play with Samba. So you can actually make your Linux system join your domain. Cool, huh? We'll save that for another course at another time. But at this point in time, this allows you to set up a Linux box and just do whatever Linux stuff you need to do. And then later, you can set up Samba. By the way, Samba really isn't on. It's on the Network Plus a little bit, and it has a passing reference on Security Plus. There is no CompTIA certification that's going to say, how do you set up a workstation to join a Windows domain? Doesn't exist. But honest to Pete, I think that's kind of like Technician 101 is being able to do a basic Samba setup. Come on, guys, it's not that hard. With Ubuntu, it has a nice little graphical interface. Anybody who's been on a Mac who's joined a Windows network can appreciate, what is it, file and print sharing for Windows, I think it's called. So it's actually pretty easy to set up. But know that that option is there for you. Okay, moving right along. Okay, so now we're going to start building some virtual machines. So number one, you always want to add an extra gig of memory to the defaults if possible. You absolutely have to do this for Windows Server. I think that VirtualBox does 3 gigabytes of RAM for Windows Server. That's ridiculous. You probably need 4. It's handy for Windows 10. I believe Windows 10 gets 2 gigs. Moving up to 3 is nice. But again, we're not asking these clients to do very much. So there's not a huge amount of RAM need. And it's really not critical for Linux at all. You can leave Linux at its default of 2, and it's no big deal. Unlike mass storage, if you suddenly go, wow, I need more memory, you can shut the virtual machine off, go into its settings, and there's a slider bar under memory. You can just say, okay, I don't want just 2, and I want 3 gigabytes of RAM. Keep in mind, though, when you're doing that, you're actually using real RAM, so you might want to be careful about that. You're not going to break anything by spinning the knob too hard. It's just going to slow everything to a crawl, that's all. And don't panic, because you can always add more memory later. It's what I just said. Okay. Make sure you connect the virtual machine to the separate NAT network you created. When you're going into the settings for the virtual machine, you're not going into the server and into the properties. You've already set that up. When you go into the network settings, it's going to have all these options. It's going to say, do you want a NAT, which is the default NAT, the 192.168.56. It's going to have bridged. It's going to have host only. And then it's going to say NAT network. So it says NAT twice, which confuses people. It's like, no, it's not. The first NAT is just that default NAT that VirtualBox installs automatically. The second NAT is the ones you've created by going into the manager and selecting properties and making them. And you can just pick yours in there, and you're up and cooking. That's it. Well, what if I don't do this? Well, we've already talked about that. You probably want to just use the default. Man, here's where you got to start being careful. So imagine you set up a Windows Active Directory domain controller, and you set it up as a bridged network. So like your real internal network that your host computer is 10.11.12. something, you're going to set that domain controller up to 10.11.12. something if you use a bridge network. And that's going to get real ugly really fast. So you got to be careful. Well, Micah, what if I screw this up? Well, it's not that big of a deal. You can always just turn off the virtual machine and just change the network settings. So it's not like you're going to break anything. Although, God, can you imagine a domain controller that you set up as a bridge network puking out all that DHCP? You don't want to do that. Okay. All right, so one of the things on building the virtual machines that people get a little confused about, I'm going to make this a little bigger. Is where do you go to install the ISOs, okay? So to install an ISO, you go into the virtual machine. Remember, once you set up the virtual machine, it's going to be looking for an ISO because you have to still install the operating system. So you go into storage, and then you click on the little fake CD-ROM, and I didn't show it here well, and I apologize for that. But you can kind of see it right there, just a little bit. There's a little tiny thing, and you hit that pull down. Actually, wait a minute. I thought I had something. There you go. So you hit this little pull down here, and then you can choose a disk file. And that's where you just go find the ISO. It's probably in your downloads folder, and you just click it, and it's as though you just took installation media on a CD and shoved it into a CD-ROM. Once VirtualBox sees that, it will go ahead and boot off that ISO image and start installing whatever operating system you have. It could be Windows Server or Linux Mint or whatever. But that is one of the tricks about VirtualBox that drives a lot of people crazy, because it's like, wait, how am I supposed to know to click on that little tiny CD-ROM looking icon to know where to put my ISO in? Luckily, with VirtualBox 6.1, they have a new feature that if you don't do that, it's going to boot up and you're going to start the virtual machine. It's going to go, don't have any bootable media. You want to point me towards an ISO that I can install? And it will remind you if you don't do that automatically. So that's kind of convenient. I think. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is building Windows Server. Oops, I got to make this small again so you guys can see it. I need to figure out a way to do a production where I can zoom in on a screen, on anything, and then I'm not that smart. I'm only one man. Hang on, I'm almost there, kids. All right, so number one, after you've installed Windows Server, obviously you're going to have to set up a local administrator account and all that kind of stuff. But first, you need to set a static IP address. So like in my network, it's 10.0.2. So I went ahead and made my machine 10.0.2.5. So this is actually pretty similar to Windows 10. Just go into Network and Sharing Center. Then when in the Network and Sharing Center, you look on the left, and you're going to see a setting that says Change Adapter Settings. Just click on that and type in whatever you want your network ID, your IP address to be. Don't forget to put in a subnet mask. Make sure you put in your router. Remember, it's going to be .1. And then for the DNS. Remember, the DNS for your Windows server is going to be the loopback. Type in 127.0.0.1. People are always like, why would I do that, Mike? Don't I want a real DNS server? Not really. You're going to be installing a DNS server on this system. And that DNS server will be able to go out to the DNS network on its own. It will not look at those settings for that type of information. So when you tell the Windows Server operating system to go to 127.0.0.1, you're really telling it to go to its own built-in DNS server that you're going to be configuring. Does that make sense? So if you wanted to, you could also type in the actual 10.0.2.5 in there or whatever you might want to do. But you want it to point to itself because you're installing a DNS server on that machine. Okay? All right. So the other thing is you want a simple name for the system. The reason you want a simple name is because the default Windows names is going to be, WinServer-R265. It's just these god-awful names that are a real pain in the rear end to deal with. And later, as you're setting up DNS and DHCP, you're going to find that a simple name will make your life easier. So just go into File Explorer and go to this PC, and then right-click on Properties, and just change the name. Don't get too creative. Call it Bob. Okay, don't call it Bob. I usually just call him Server, and that just makes my life a little bit easier. Later, when I'm trying to do diagnostics, I don't have to look for something called server, or whatever. It just says server. Life is easier that way. By the way, at this point in the game, as you're setting up this Windows Server system, it's not in a domain. It's just still in a work group like anything else. Don't touch that. We'll take care of that later. But at this point in the game, just give it a simple name. Call it Bob. Whoops, wrong one. That was PowerShell, not PowerPoint. Okay, and then the third thing you got to do is install the roles. And here you got to go to good old Server Manager. Server Manager comes up by default in Windows Server unless you turn it off, so it's always going to pop up. And so you're going to install three things. You're going to install Active Domain Services, you're going to install DNS, and you're going to install DHCP. The only thing you really got to be careful about at this point in the game, and I'm going to have you refer back to Monday's video to double check the actual steps, but the only thing you have to be careful about is you need to set up a domain name. And because this domain's never ever going to be out on the real internet, we can mess with fully qualified domain names, and we can use the famous .local. So you can call it mydomain.local. Okay, get the idea? And so when your DNS server is talking to all the machines on your little virtual machine network, they're all going to be, Windows 10.mydomain.local or linuxbox.mydomain.local, or you want to put a camera in there, whatever, it doesn't matter. You couldn't put a camera in there because it's isolated. You want to use that .local. In order to use something .com, well, you could get away with it because it's never going to go to the outside of the world, but you'd have to register it and all that kind of stuff, which is unnecessary for our educational purposes at this point. Second thing you're going to have to do is set up a DNS server. Now, the interesting thing is you set up the domain properly, you give your server a simple name like server, and you make sure it has a static IP address, you pretty much just turn on DNS and it works. There's nothing you really have to do. However, boy, that's a really great place, especially like for Network Plus. There's a lot of DNS questions. What is an A record? What is a quadruple A record? What's start of authority? What's name server? What's mail server? Well, those are in Security Plus too, to a smaller extent. And you set up a DNS server on a virtual machine in Windows Server, forget about PowerShell, forget about Active Directory, just to practice DNS. It's a great way to do it, okay? So DNS sets up automatically. It will automatically put your, the server itself will be on the DNS server. You'll be able to see it in the forward lookup zone, and it's ready to rock and roll. There's really nothing you need to do. The last step is going to be DHCP. Sorry, kids. The last step is DHCP. So you're going to set up a DHCP server. Just make sure you have you're going to create a scope. You're going to set up an address range in there. You'll make exceptions. Remember that you're going to have to put they call it router in DHCP. It's your default gateway, and you know what your default gateway. Mine's 10.0.2.1, okay? And setting up your subnet mask, make sure it's passing out a WAC 24. I'm assuming we're all doing WAC 24s on here. And you're pretty much ready to go. There'll be some reboots in there. But the actual installation time, take about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on your system. Virtual machines might run a little faster than that. Okay. I'm running out of time. Good Lord. Man. Guys, I really wanted to at least, even Scott's, when's your dentist appointment? It's in 30 minutes. It's about 10 minutes away, but I don't want to cut it any closer than this. Let me see if I can, oh, hang on a minute. Scott had some good information in here. The earlier question about the CYSA update, that's this week. So yeah, thanks, Scott. That's what I get for not going in those managers meetings that I should be in. Mark Wheeler, way back at 203. On the last tab when we were in DNS Manager, I did not see the IPv6 quadruple A anywhere. Did I miss a step, or can I add it manually? So if IPv6 is turned on, which the way we did it, we did not use IPv6, you will automatically get a quadruple A record, Mark. So what I would do is go into your network card properties and light up IPv6. I'd almost rather you not do IPv6 at this point in the game. Let's get this all running with IPv4. IPv6 is kind of a different animal. It wouldn't change too much at this level. But Mark, just to answer your question, if you wanted to manually add any record, you go into your DNS Manager, open up the forward lookup zone for your domain. You'll see your list. You'll see your SOA, your name server, an A record, a bunch of weird stuff with underlines starting it. That's just Active Directory stuff that we ignore. And anywhere in that white space on the right, just right-click there and select New, and you get a whole big list. You can add a new A record, quadruple A, whatever you want to do. However, do be aware that part of the beauty of Microsoft Active Directory is that you will almost never type in manually any records, any A records, unless you have a server. Like you want to set up a web server, you're going to set up a www and type in its IP address as an A or as a quadruple A record. But other than that, it's pretty much automatic. Microsoft does an amazing job at making these systems pretty easy to run. Okay, all right. Guys, I'm going to go ahead and log off for the day. I'm assuming that people, I got to go to the dentist, I'm sorry. I will be back on Monday, and we will pick up right where we left off. I am checking. Dave Rush will be on Friday. I don't have any details, but you know Dave, he's always going to have something fun and interesting to do. So be sure to tune in Friday, 2 o'clock, right here on the Total Seminars channel on YouTube for more Raspberry Pidiums that Dave Rush will be looking to do. If you want to contact me, my email is michaelm@totalsem.com. Feel free to send me those messages. I'm a little overwhelmed, but I'll get through them. It's okay. Guys, I got to go fix my tooth. I'm going to gamble that the Discord channel will probably kick over. I just got to fix a tooth. It's not that big of a deal. I'll take care of it. Don't forget all the specials that Scott has put up there. And I will see you guys on Monday with a new bicuspid, or at least the new end of a bicuspid. So until then, as you guys well know, this is your little Uncle Mikey saying good night. Good night.